meeting is started and verbal confirmation provided when we are broadcasting, please. Thank you. Can I formally welcome you all to this meeting of the Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. The Council is streamlining this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and also making a recording. The recording will be available via the Council's website shortly after the meeting has concluded. Other attendees are permitted to film, photograph and record our public meeting, providing that it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. If you do not wish to be filmed or photographed, please identify yourself so anyone who intends to record the meeting can be made aware. Anyone so indicate? Noted, thank you. A member of the public. To ensure the recording quality is maintained, could members please speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum, and ensure that your mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent. So to welcome people who are in the meeting with us today, we've got some members of the committee joining us remotely. I'll ask them to confirm they can hear us and check that we can hear them. Councillor Fagan.
Yes, good afternoon, Chair. I can see and hear you.
Thanks, Tony. Councillor Kenyon.
Yeah, I can see and hear you.
Thank you. Mr. Sam Prattley.
Thank you, Chair. I can see and hear you.
Great, thanks for joining us. Just for a note, any members of the committee or co-optees with voting rights who join the meeting remotely are not able to vote in any resolutions of the committee, but may otherwise participate in the debate. Also present in the room today, we have Councillor Dana Tonbury, Cabinet Member, Children and Families. Thanks for joining us, Dana. Darryl Freeman, Director, Children and Families. Darryl. Matthew Sampson, Interim Assistant Director, Quality Assurance, Safeguarding and Partnership. Hi, Matthew. And we also at the back, Llewellyn Featherstone, Communications Manager, who will be present for any media assistance in case it's required, because we have been told that a film production company may record the meeting, although it doesn't look as though they're here. I'm also delighted to welcome Gladys Rhodes-White, who's our DfE advisor, come as an observer today, and it's great timing you were here and we're having the meeting.
Thank you.
Great to see you here, thank you. I think I've covered everybody. So, any apologies for absence do we have, please, Sarah?
I note we have Councillor Graham Andrews isn't present.
Yep.
We've also had apologies from Andy James and also Jane Ellis from Health Watcher Centre. Apologies.
Jane Ellis. That's right, those are the ones I had as well, so they're recorded. Any members aware of any other apologies? And I don't think there are any name substitutes. So declarations of interest to receive any declarations of interest by members in respect of items on the agenda. Do any members wish to declare any Schedule 1, Schedule 2 or other interest in any of today's agenda items? No? Okay. On to the next item, number 4, the minutes. To approve and sign the minutes of the meeting held on 12th of October 2021. No matters of accuracy have been notified to the monitoring officer. So can I ask, are the minutes of the 12th of October approved, please? May I have a proposer? Councillor Edmonds, seconder. Councillor Anson. All those in favour? Members who are present. Are you voting, Councillor Summers?
Yeah.
Are you in favour?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4. That's 5 of us. So that's unanimous of those present. Questions from members of the public, item 5. To receive any written questions from members of the public, we had 2 questions submitted. The questions and responses have been published in a supplement to the agenda papers. And ask the clerk to confirm if there are any supplementary questions. I believe we have 1.
That's correct, Chair. We've received 1 supplementary question,
Okay.
and you have the text of it.
I can read out.
It's also on the screen.
Yes, thank you. For those of you who can see it. It's about the Hoople advertisement for the additional co-optee. The Hoople advertisement includes to reflect the views and interests of families who are or have been supported by social workers relating to matters under discussion at the Children's Scrutiny Committee. This could be someone with lived experience of this support or, for example, a volunteer in this area. The resolution on 5th of August 2021 was in response to a question about experts by experience. An adult excluded those supported as children. If there is more than one expression of interest for the adult representative of families, it is not known how and by whom he/she will be selected. Is the committee confident that any co-optee appointed will accord with their intent on the 5th of August, namely, if at all possible, an expert by experience and not an adult who as a child was supported by a social worker? In answer to that, can I say we will provide a written response to that question? So thank you to the Member of Public who raised it. I think I should also point out, as the Chair, before we move on from public questions, that I should point out that there was a delay in answering the supplementary question from Mrs Shaw regarding the use of alleged victim, which was asked at our meeting on the 7th of September. Officers have now supplied a response to that, and it has been appended to the minutes of that meeting. Councillor Hewitt.
Yeah, I'd just like to point out that I think we need a process whereby when we've agreed something on committee here between ourselves, that there will be an expert by experience, for instance, that is accurately reflected in the action that emerges, because I absolutely agree with the questioner that we were not asking for somebody who'd been a volunteer in children's services or a retired social worker. We were asking for an expert by experience, and we know that third sector voice is an incredibly powerful voice and one which will keep us on our toes, and we want that here in CYPS. And I'm dismayed that the advert that went out didn't accurately reflect what we requested.
Thank you, Councillor Hewitt. It was also obviously a lot later than we would hope it would be as well, which is another issue of frustration and concern. Councillor Summers.
Just a point of order, Chair. I noticed Councillor Kenyon is not down on the agenda. Is there a reason for that?
Councillor Kenyon, he's attending remotely.
I know, but he's not on the agenda.
No, just like then.
So
it is a public record, so.
Yeah,
It should be-
we'll make sure it's corrected. Thank you.
Thank you.
Highlighting.
you mean the agenda? Not on the
Yeah.
agenda.
Councillor Kenyon is not on the agenda
Listed as a member of the committee.
as a member of the Scrutiny
Yeah.
Committee.
He's a co-opted member,
I know, but
non-voting, as you know.
Yeah, I know that, but he's,
His
we
name
have,
is
we
listed.
have two co-opted members that are named, and he's not named.
A point taken.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't understand what you're saying now. I should also point out, remind members that there is an action tracker taken up Councillor Hewitt's point, which is appended to the minutes of actions that were agreed with this committee. And it's always good to look at those because there are a number of actions that actually haven't been done yet. So I can assure you that myself and Chair will be following up on those actions to ask why they haven't been done yet. Okay, we move on to one of the, item 6 is questions from members of the council, and in fact there are no questions we've received from councillors. There are two main items of business for this meeting. Item 7, which is the annual independent review of reviewing officers' report. Now we had a workshop session on that this morning. This is, as an introduction, this is meant to be a report that's produced annually, and I understand scrutinised annually. And part of what we were trying to find out this morning, when was the last one done? And for information, the last time Scrutiny actually looked at the independent reviewing officers' report was in 2017. And as far as we know, records of reports produced annually since haven't got information on that yet. And I think it's only fair to point out that the independent reviewing officer is pretty clearly an important role in determining whether what should be done in children's care is actually being done. And the fact that it hasn't been seen, and as far as I know, a report not issued since 2017, should be a matter of great concern that should be noted. However, we've corrected that now. We have got a report to review, and we did, as a committee, have a thorough session with an independent reviewing officer, and Matthew this morning, which taught us an awful lot about the role of the ROs and hopefully will help us to scrutinise the report we're about to get. So could I invite Matthew Sampson as the Interim Assistant Director of Quality Assurance, Safeguarding and Partnerships to introduce this item, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can everybody hear me okay?
I think you might be a bit closer to the mic, please.
Yeah.
Matthew, correctly, brilliantly.
Is that better?
That's better, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Chair, this is the annual report for the Independent Reviewing Officers Service. It's for the period April 2020 to March 2021, and it is in line with the national guidance for the service to produce a review of its work, the impact of the work it's carrying out, and the impact on children looked after. It is a statutory responsibility for the local authority to provide every child looked after with an independent reviewing officer, whose role is to scrutinise and monitor the progress of the care plan for that child, and to challenge the local authority appropriately to avoid drift and delay, and to ensure that the care plan is the right plan for the child, and will consistently and regularly review whether or not the legal status of the child is correct on each review. The review process is that within 20 days of a placement, a review will take place, and then there will be a 3-month review followed by a 6-monthly review for the whole period of the child's life in care. However, there will be situations where a change in placement, for example, or change in circumstances may result in the independent reviewing officer creating calling an early review to review the issues around that particular event in the child's life, to ensure that the activity around the child is appropriate to meet the child's needs. The IRO service in Herefordshire in 2020 to 2021 was a joint service. The IROs, the Independent Reviewing Officers for Children Looked After, also carried out child protection case conferences for those children subject to child protection plans. That was felt to be unwieldy, and in January of 2021 that decision was taken to separate the service into a independent reviewing officer service and a independent child protection chair service, and that situation is the current position in Herefordshire. That has helped to create some realignment of the current workload for independent reviewing officers, and you'll see that the caseloads for reviewing officers are within the national guidance. National guidance is that each reviewing officer will hold approximately 65 to 70 young people, and during 2020-21 that they were holding an average of 65-66. I can report that the current situation is now an average of 70, but again, we are within the guidance set nationally. The report is for information to members, and obviously I'm happy for any questions and clarification. I recommend the report to be accepted.
Thank you, Matthew. Open to committee members. Have you got any questions or comments to make? We did have a very thorough review this morning, I have to say, so we had the opportunity to ask a lot of questions then in case people wonder about the science, but Councillor Hewitt, you had your arm up.
Yeah, well, reading through, what's clear to me in here, and I'd like an answer to this, please, and see if I have this anywhere near correct, is that, well, there's a bit of a question in there too. So let's just go with this one first. Go with where you just left off, Matthew. So you've indicated about the separation of the roles of presenting a child protection case conference from the role of the IRO, and you've that was done for a reason, but maybe it was for two reasons. Did that joint role affect the independence which is essential to the IRO's role, or was it simply a matter of workload, or was it both?
No, it doesn't affect the independence of the IRO, because the IRO is when they're dealing with children looked after are independent. Well, actually, even when they're carrying out the role as child protection chair, they're acting as an independent chair to those meetings. It is about focus and about being clear about we want to make sure that children looked after get the right focus and get a dedicated IRO, and if we can maintain the IRO purely for children looked after, maintain stability for those children, and that long-term connection relationship can be developed. And the demands for the child protection chairs is a different focus, and therefore it's about skills and capacity and workload and appropriate needs for children.
So there's a bit of a follow-up question, just a small one to this. Who now takes on the load of child protection chair? Who does that?
We have dedicated child protection chairs in the service, so the service is now split into two. It's got a group of independent reviewing officers and a group of independent child protection chairs.
Okay, and are they a newly appointed group of dedicated child protection chairs?
No, some of them were doing the double-hatted role before, and we've separated them out, but because of increased demand, we have recently recruited an extra capacity to cope with extra demand in the service.
So, sorry, I've got a bit of a barrage of questions, and if anybody wants to interrupt me and stick their hand up and have a go, please do.
Well, there are two other councillors with hands up, so
Okay, shall I just do
your next one and then
do my
one
next one and then... So, reading through the report, what I've observed is that it appears, at least, that IROs in this period that you're accounting for, and what's sad to me is that we have some lost years, and probably, I don't know whether there's going to be any accounting for those lost years, but for the year that we're talking about, it's clear that the IROs are flagging things up and being hobbled in their work by reports not being delivered to them in such a time that they can proceed effectively. So there are two issues, and I notice that quite a lot of training has gone into the IRO service, but I think my question is, it seems to me, reading the report, that the IRO service was trying to do its work, but the work that they were suggesting should happen wasn't being picked up. Is that a correct analysis, or would you have a different view?
I think it would be fair to say that some of the challenges the IRO service were expressing weren't as forthright and as responded to in as timely way as one would have hoped and would have anticipated, and that we're trying to achieve in today's situation. We've got a different situation today. I think it's also right to recognise that the IRO service historically has not fulfilled as robustly as it needs to have done some of its statutory roles in terms of raising and escalating cases through the process. We have what's called a dispute resolution process, which is a standard process for all IRO services nationally, and there is clearly an increasing number, and this report does suggest there was an increasing number during 2021, but there is evidence of a not such a robust process occurring historically, which may have led to some delays and some drifting cases.
Is this being reflected in IRO's feedback about how seriously their work is being taken?
What we're doing, and obviously when we report on the current year, at the end of the next financial year, we'll see a different position, and that the IROs have clearly, historically in Herefordshire, not had the status accrued to them. IROs are traditionally required graded as equivalent to team managers. That hasn't been historically the case in Herefordshire. It is being addressed, but in 2021 it was still not at that grade, and therefore some of the IRO's feedback would be, and it is in the report, that they weren't given maybe the due respect for their challenge that one would have anticipated if they'd have been given the appropriate credence. However, that situation was changing in 2021 and has continued to improve significantly during the current year.
I think to support your point there, at the session we had this morning, it was impressive to hear an actual IRO telling us about their role and what job they did. I think the other point to make that you were saying, Matthew, and to emphasise that the officers are saying they weren't actually in post
Yeah, thank you. I just note on the report 2.1.4, the barriers to children and young people accessing CAMS, and it says there, while IROs identifying referrals are appropriately made by social workers, the non-acceptance of referrals by health services does not then result in exploration of other pathways to meet the needs or use of multi-agency professional disagreement process to challenge such barriers. So is what this report saying that actually if the referral to CAMS meets a dead end, that is it, in effect, there is a dead end in terms of supporting children and young people with therapy or counselling? Is there an issue in Herefordshire about getting access to mental health and counselling support for young people?
Clearly in 2021, what the report identifies is there was some lack of follow-up that was required by the IRO service in respect of services not being delivered. The IRO service, as an independent service, had the right not only to challenge our own council social workers, but our partnership as well, and to escalate through the partnership escalation process. There has been some challenges in terms of resource, and those challenges are being addressed by the partnership. But if the need of this young person is such that they need ongoing support, and that support cannot be provided by the local CAMS, and the local authority itself will look at alternative solutions and resolutions to those difficulties to achieve the mental health support that we'll need. But we will challenge and we will hold accountable, and we do hold accountable our partners in health to ensure that we get the right service at the right time to meet the right needs of the child.
Are you happy that answers your question, Councillor Fagan?
Yeah, I think it answers it. I'm just still not entirely sure. Are the young people actually getting the support that they need? I know that we would like to sort of direct it that way, but sort of currently, are they getting that support? I'm not entirely sort of clear about that answer. Sorry.
Okay, well, Daryl's offered to give some more insight into that, so Daryl, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. And to endorse Matthew's position, certainly there are robust pathways and referral routes in the climate, if you like, or the terrain within which you're operating around mental health and CAMS pathways has changed significantly in the last 12 months, particularly impacted by COVID. So schools and other settings are much more aware of mental health and well-being, and often we're conflating the two. Many schools want some relatively low-level or universal offer type well-being supports, and then there's the CAMS referrals for more complex needs. And certainly in answer to the question, or to reinforce Councillor Fagan's question, Ofsted have asked the same question in a recent focus visit, and I'd suggest rather than Matthew or I try to answer something which isn't in our particular domain of authority, we might want to ask our health colleagues to come when we talk about the forward plan later this afternoon, to think about agendering that as a forward agenda item.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
I agree, Darryl, that's what I was going to suggest too.
Thank you, Darryl. I see Councillor Kenyon, you had your hands up earlier, so over to you for your question.
Thank you, Chairman. Hello, Matthew. I hope you're well. I don't think we've met before. I've got a couple of questions, a couple of yes/no answers, and then perhaps a bit more in depth. First off, are you happy with the report you've done? Is there anything that you felt that it could have been better with the report, or what's gone into it?
The answer based on the information that we had for 2021, yeah, we are happy with the report. We will, however, when we look at the report that we'll produce, probably August 2022, which will be for this current year, and then finishing the year, we'll be looking at some comparative data and looking at if we can strengthen some of the areas in terms of being aware about some of the impact of the activity of the IROs on young people, because we're measuring much closer in this current year the work and the impact of the young people of the IRO services and how that is impacting on outcomes for children.
Okay, this is always a $1 million question. It's always about money. Do you feel you're resourced well enough to carry out the work you need to do, the important work you do?
Yeah, we monitor the numbers of children per IRO very closely. There is a guidance that says 65 to 70 is a caseload. We currently, during the 2021, the average caseload was around 66. We currently have an average caseload per IRO of 70 for full-time equivalent. So as long as we do monitor that, and obviously if we do need to, we would be looking at whether or not further resource would be required, but that would be clearly only if we saw an increased numbers of children looked after and meeting the requirements.
Okay, that's good to know.
Sorry, Councillor Ken, I think if we were just adding...
say again, sorry.
Yeah, I think it might just worth adding to your question. We asked that question in the workshop this morning and got quite a detailed answer on resources. And as Matthew said, the guideline is about 65 to 70 cases per IRO. We have a principal IRO, 3 full-time and 3 part-time. So we asked the question,
thank you, Chairman. I think this is just for the great unwashed out there as well. You know, this meeting's for not about this morning, it's about here and now.
Can hear that we asked that question, and yes, the answer was that there is a full complement, that it's slightly over the 70, but at the moment it's within the capacity to manage, and in fact there was no backlog of cases at the moment. And that was what we got a reassurance on the meeting this morning, which I think adds detail to your question.
Okay, so, thank you, Chairman. Matthew, as you're happy with your report and you've presented it, do you feel you're going to be listened to, and where do you send it to be listened to? Does it end up on a shelf and not listened to? So where do you want it to go to?
Well, the report comes obviously scrutiny to feed members. We also take it to our safeguarding partnership, policy and effectiveness group. So some of the issues that we've and quite rightly that members have raised today in respect of mental health issues, will be feeding that into when we take it to the safeguarding partnership group, so that they'll be aware of the issues. And we use the report as a way of monitoring progress year on year. So we appreciate that this is the first report for some time, but this report will be clearly a benchmark for us to monitor 2021, 2022 and ongoing, and enables us to make the challenges. We also obviously report through to the DCS, and if we need to in terms of resource, this will help us feed resources into the resource allocation processes of the council through the management board and obviously through committees as required.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. Yeah, I'm nearly done. Does it also go to the cabinet member and her team to ensure that they're well aware of what's going on?
The cabinet member will get a copy of this report, and obviously will be made aware, and we will do briefings when we do meet with the cabinet member if there are issues and challenges in the year, because we won't just wait for 12 months if we saw a sudden spike or sudden increase in demand that would mean that our workload was such that we'd need to look at additional resources. Then we'd obviously be in liaison as throughout the year. We won't just wait for an annual end of report.
Yeah.
Matthew, can I ask, I know you're trying to be speaking to the screen, but actually you're moving away from the mic and it's a bit more difficult to hear. I'm sure they won't mind you being rude with your back to them, but I think we all need to make sure we get close to the mic so when the recording is read, people can understand what was actually said.
Do apologise. So did people hear? Did that last?
I could hear it okay. Are we else okay? But that's, I'm sure the recording.
Chairman, I've got one last question then.
Yes, of course.
In light of obviously that we've been found wanted in children's services, and additional money's been pumped in for to try and address this and get ourselves out of special measures which we're in. Your organisation, what you do you think waiting until next August 22 is soon enough? Do you think we should do a report a bit sooner So if the things do need to change, they can be changed quicker.
I think that's a question we'd all like to know an answer to, actually.
What we do is regularly monitor our caseloads for our IRO service. I'll give an example because we do the same. I do the same for the child protection chairs. We identified recently that we needed extra capacity in child protection chairs, and we identified extra resource to recruit extra capacity so that we can meet that. In the same way, if the IRO chairs were under significant pressure, I'd be reporting back to Darryl as the DCS, who would link in with the lead member, and Darryl's got his hand up so he can add to this, I think. So we'd be looking at if we needed to make any interim action. We would not wait until next April to make action if we needed actions to be made.
Thank you. Darryl.
Thank you, Chair. The August 2022 reference is likely to be the most practical and the earliest date that the next annual report can come to you. So it will come sooner than it has done this year, but by the time it goes through its governance, reporting and governance, it will come to you likely July, August next year. And Matthew's quite right, the caseloads of the IROs and the themes that come out from the IRO escalations are regularly received by the Directorate Leadership team, and any themes will be fed into the quality assurance activities that will also go to the Improvement Board and the performance reports that will in future come to this committee.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Anson. Does that answer all your questions okay? Councillor Kenyon. Thank you. Councillor Anson, you were next.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. First of all, quickly, because the report does say 6.1.12.2, it needs updating because the current IRO service has 4 full-time IROs and 2 part-time IROs, and that was September. So it's now changed. And I went through this, a couple of things I raised on 3.7, communication with parents. Any thoughts on that? 5.2, the care plan it says it's partly completed. Is it now completed? And also some light on 6.1.3. Which I'd quite like to have talked about.
Okay. Sorry, I'll go back to the point 3.7. Sorry, let me just go back. The issues raised in this report, I'll go back to the first point, Councillor Anson. This report states the staffing structure during 2021. It has changed slightly now from in the discussion we had earlier, but that's because we've got more capacity, but also it's about people's working patterns and changing working patterns. So we've adjusted the capacity to meet people wanting how they want to work.
Okay.
And recognising also slightly different working patterns. There has been increased difficulties in the links and the communications as people be aware of working through what has been a difficult period around COVID and keeping in contact, and we are always looking at how we can improve our communications to ensure that we engage parents of children, because we are working in partnership with parents, so we will continue to work that. And the care plan is being not totally completed yet, because we are working very closely with young people, because we want to get it right in how young people wish to see the care plan to make it child friendly and appropriate. So we are working on continuing, and the plan is that will be completed during this current year.
Do you have a date by any chance?
I can give you the date. I can come back with the date if that's helpful. I'll need to speak exactly to my head of service with the exact date of when that was to be completed. And 6.6?
613.
613. And require also at least 5 years qualification. And this was about the experience of the IROs. Is there a specific question, Councillor?
Yeah, I mean, it's what is to date being done about it? I think is probably the question.
We have got we had an unstable workforce in Herefordshire historically with the IRO service, which has been stabilised during 2021, and I can say is stable now during 21-22, and we have now got the appropriate experienced IROs in the service, and the difficulties that have historically been in terms of getting the right level of recruitment has partially been due to some of those historical issues that are alluded to in the report in terms of the position that the IROs have been put in terms of their pay grade. Historically in Herefordshire that has been addressed, and the current workforce is at the right experience levels that we need for the IROs, and we have been doing additional training and support the IRO service over the last 6 months to support and improve their resilience, and also help them in terms of bringing together some of the signs of safety processes that help to focus the reviews in a more child-focused way.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. Thank
Councillor
you.
Summers, you were next.
Thank you, Chair. There are a number of legal aspects to look after children and what we're doing with them. I think probably some of the biggest problems has been caused by that. Now, I understand legal now has extra capacity, but what I would like to know is does the independent reviewing officer have immediate access to that legal capacity?
The independent reviewing officers have access to independent legal outside of the council, have independent legal advice.
How many people do we have for IROs in legal? I know we have about 31 people in legal on looked after children. How many do we have for you?
I'll talk very loudly and hope that it will get. Oh, it's working again.
Yeah.
It's a commission service, so if the IRO required to their own independent legal advice, which is outside of the council's legal service, it's commissioned and they can access that as and when they require that information, and can obviously see that get that legal advice on behalf of those young people.
Okay, so my question was, is it immediate? How long does it take? Legal is a priority in what we're doing right now, and we need to make sure that our frontline staff are not stepping in minefields. So legal is a definite. If we need to know that they are protected throughout this, the frontline workers need to be protected with the ability to get to legal. Anyway, thank you.
But we've not had any difficulty at all on behalf of the IROs needing to seek quick, rapid turnaround of legal advice.
Thank you.
Might I just add, Chair? Certainly, I think Councillor Summers also, there's kind of 2 points in your question in terms of frontline staff as well. So the frontline staff is provided, legal advice to our frontline staff is provided by our in-house legal team, which has expanded considerably over the year, and both I and Claire Ward, the Councillor's sister, are very confident that we've got the right resources in place. What Matthew's talking about certainly is the independent legal advice for the IROs, which is a commission service as and when we need it.
But we also need to make sure that's in place also.
It is, yes, and it is, yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Jones, you were next.
Thank you. Yeah, I noticed the graph on page 6 shows that child looked after reviews of all in 2021 have all gone up. Very high percentages, incredibly good results. Would you put that down to lower caseloads or better management?
I think it's a combination of both. I think it's understanding a clear grip of the roles and the management oversight and monitoring, and we have continued to work on making more robust performance management data for the IRO service, so they can do that. But it's also about maintaining the caseloads within the handbooks requirements, national handbooks.
Could you also explain, we talked about this morning, there was 3 permanent IROs and 3 part-time. Part-time, what was that? Is that 1 day a week, 2 days a week, or a certain number of caseloads? How does that?
The part-time staff are a number of different hours because it's about meeting their personal circumstances. So we have one person, for example, that works 4 days a week, and caseloads are pro rata. So if it's a full-time equivalent of 70, the caseloads are adjusted to take account of people's part-time hours.
Thank you.
Answer your questions, okay.
Yep.
Thank you. I had a few other hands going up. Councillor Hewitt, I had some questions too, but the Vice Chair first.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm looking at page 27 and the oversights for IROs and the figures 218 to 19 and 219 to 20. And it's saying that the child has a minimum of 4 or more IRO oversights. And, you know, what I like about this report is that it doesn't actually, it's not telling me the things that are it's not avoiding telling me the things that are depressing. It says it's not counted. And, you know, of course, past practice not being good is always depressing, but what's much better is that you are now being able to collect that data, and you have 96% of a minimum of 4 or more IRO oversights. However, I was just comparing that table with the one above on page 26, and is putting a figure in for 2018 to 19. Well, that's minutes, so IRO recommendations completed in 5 days. If there haven't been IRO 4 or more IRO oversights, how can we get a figure of recommendations completed in 73% of recommendations completed in 5 days? I suppose I just don't know how those two tables relate to one another, and maybe I'm comparing apples with pears, but I think it's a bit difficult to say that you can get a 73% figure there if actually you're not counting into 18 and 19. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I think I can hopefully explain. The recommendations are recommendations from review to review, being completed through the 6 months. The oversights are an activity, and an activity that will be more robust and start in 21, much more robustly, about checking what actions have occurred in between the reviews. So instead of waiting, doing a review in January and then wait until June to check what activity has been going on, and yes, you could get actions completed in that 6 month period. IROs now go into the child's records and check that progress is occurring in between that period, so we just don't wait 6 months, because 6 months can be a long time in a child's life.
Okay.
Happy with that, Councillor?
Maybe. I don't know. I think it's me and handling data probably, but you know, there does seem to be a little bit of a clash between those two things, but maybe we can have a longer conversation. Yeah.
I've got a few questions to ask. First off, we were told that the last report that we actually looked at was 2017. We didn't get an answer this morning whether actually annual reports were produced, either did it come to scrutiny, or do you know, is this actually the first annual report since 2017 that's actually been produced?
I can't actually give a definitive answer on that. I know that this report was completed. and I haven't been able to access in the time any previous reports, but that doesn't mean there aren't other previous reports. It's just about a matter of time today to check that one.
So you're saying they weren't?
I can't answer that.
You can't answer.
I can't answer that because obviously I left
Yes,
one session and I've gone on to other meetings.
I know we had to look back this morning.
We need to go back and trace the history. So I only can respond on this one, but we will come back to you and identify.
You'll come back to us. Yes, yeah, okay, that'd be good. So I've got a couple of other questions to ask. I know, obviously, we're reviewing it, but what is the regulatory position on actually Scrutiny having to review the IRO report every year? I mean, it would seem to make sense, not make sense to me that we should, but it's not been in the work programme, for example. So is it something that is a regulatory thing, or is it something that we believe we should be doing? I believe we should be, but I just want to know what the legal position is on that.
According to the IRO handbook, the IRO has to produce an annual report every year, and it's to be received by the local authority. So that typically goes to Scrutiny and to the Safeguarding Partnership, but it's not a requirement absolute, as I recall. I will go and double check after the meeting, but as I recall, it's not an absolute requirement. The requirement is that they produce one and that we apply some appropriate governance to that. Clearly what we would want, and what I would want, is that in future, and we already know it's on the forward plan for next year, which is why we're talking about the August.
Indeed, so yeah.
We clearly want it to come here and to be part of the Scrutiny timetable.
It's good that we're scrutinising it now. And actually a question that came this morning, we were told about the IRO manual, which obviously we didn't know, but and you've answered a question on that. I think it would be a good idea if that was circulated so we could see it, so we understand the role. Is that something I'm sure you can undertake to do?
Yeah, the IRO handbook is a government published handbook. It's not been updated for some years. We can certainly circulate the link to that. Yeah.
Okay. And just a couple of others. One is that we're quite good looking at the report if we included next year's statistical neighbour comparisons. I don't think that's in this report.
No, we can do that. We can compare.
Can I add a caveat? So a lot of the performance that's included typically in these reports isn't nationally published data. So we'll struggle to compare all of the data with statistical neighbours because it isn't published in that way at all. We'll only be able to take a small number of the performance indicators which are part of the national data set.
I can understand that, but I think given that we're in an improvement plan for a couple of years, I think it would be particularly good if we could get, even if it's on a confidential basis with some of the people we're talking to.
We can do a range of comparisons, but they won't all necessarily be the statistical neighbour set, but we can work with the DFE and others to think about how we do that going forward.
That'd be great, thank you. And last, I see on 2.1 and 2.2.2 and 2.1.3 in the summary, looking at particular aspects that we should be concerned about, maybe a scrutiny before we get a report in a year's time, and maybe something we should look at progress during the year. I would take committee and officers' advice on this, but there were two unacceptable areas of activity. One was 120 informal and formal disputes. There was unacceptable drift on those. 30% of all disputes were raised by that. That's clearly something that should be reduced. I would suggest it'd be good to get some feedback on how that's improving before we wait another year. And similarly, that there were also unacceptable, where's the wording, non-acceptance of referrals by health services, which I think again is a concern. If we're passing them on and they're not being accepted, again I think that's something we should review and look at before we wait another year for a report. Because both of those are areas where perhaps could lead to the sort of problems we've been having, leading to an improvement plan. Those are two things that struck me we should look at reviewing maybe in 6 months rather than a year. Would that be sensible to you too? Okay, so we can put that as a recommendation.
Yeah, we can do that.
And would I be right in thinking those are probably the two key areas that have come out where they're unacceptable aspects of the service which aren't necessarily the IO's fault, but make it their job more difficult to do?
I think it's a positive way of looking at how the service is moving on and how the service is positioned and the relationship between what is the assurance part of the children's services and the delivery part of the service, if you want to separate it like that, is working and how that relationship is developing, because although it's got to be a constructive challenge, it also needs to be positive as well in that sense. So
Indeed, yeah.
it's a two-way
That's the
process.
positive, positive. Lots of good things happening, but the few things that are challenging, those are the ones we should be looking at and identifying. Thank you. Right, your turn, Councillor Summers.
Well, first of all, I have to say, I've been doing children's off and on for the past 5-6 years, and I'm actually quite impressed with what you're doing at the moment, and I really appreciate it. And especially as you're all pretty well new to the positions that you're in, and you're taking information that from previous times. I would like to see some coming back to us in less than 6 months if it was possible, when you've got a grip on everything, rather than trying to sometimes guess at what was there and take somebody else's word. Yeah, I think you'll have more of an idea of the pathway in 6 months than you do now, and I would like to see it back with us in around 6 months. But overall, I have to say that I am suitably impressed, and we keep up the good work. Thank you.
Good positive bit of feedback there as well, yes, lots of good things happening, and it's the things that are, the few things, hopefully, that are the ones which are challenged where we can become a county of excellence, which I know is our aspiration. Councillor Anson, you can ask a question?
Just a quick comment, that I do find it strange and hard to write a report without referencing a report that precedes it. So we must know where that report is. And just at the end, you say IROs will work with the participation team and children council.
That's what
Which is children? Who's children council?
Question?
It's the young people, the participation officer has a group of young people that they regularly meet with, that we help share information, and usually children looked after, or children are care leavers. So they'll work with those groups to help them learn about what works better for when they, and how we can do reviews better, because it's obviously important to learn from young people who have gone through the system to how we get things better next time.
So I'm sorry, who are they then? We don't, because we don't have a children council as a label. We have
Your Voice Matters.
Your Voice
Is
Matters
the,
and things like that. Is that what you're referring to?
It is it's the Your Voice Matters group, and obviously again it's changed its title over the last sort of 18 months or so. But certainly the relationship with that group has changed with the IROs, and will be reflected in the report that covers this year, current year.
So can I follow up
So
for
Hugh, would you
you?
like to ask a
Yeah,
question?
please.
Yeah. So thank you, Chair. So my question is, CYPS have been asking for representation of the voice of the child in this committee since May.
June, when we took over.
May,
the 1st.
And this would have been an ideal meeting with the interface with the IRO for that voice to be in the room. And we really need it at the meeting, so please can we have it as an action point that we don't have one more meeting without the voice of the child presented by the participatory officer, which is something that we were promised, in the room, please. I'd really like that.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Hewitt. That's probably worth raising. We did ask the question for Councillor Hewitt this morning about the participatory officer. In the same way we weren't clear the role of IROs until we had the briefing, effective training this morning. I think it would be really good if we had some in-depth information about the role of the participatory officer, and it has been something that we promised in the very first meeting actually that we'd have at one of these meetings. So I think it would be something to either at a meeting or have some sort of training workshop or report about what is the role of the participatory officer, and when we can get someone to come to the meeting and talk to us about that role. Darryl.
Thank you, Chair, and I'd suggest if we perhaps work that first as a workshop, so we can work some of the thinking from members as well, but also involve the service that provides advocacy for the IROs and CP chairs as well. So those are two different activities that very much go hand in hand and would complement this agenda item.
Yeah, and it's so we can understand how they complement each other, which we don't fully at the moment. Okay, any other questions anyone have? Councillor Summers.
Just back to that question, it'd be great if we could have a full council meeting, briefing on this. Because this is all seems, I've been around a while, all seems a bit new. I think it'll be fairly new to quite a few councillors. We do a lot of new councillors, a lot of old councillors. But it would be worthwhile having a full council briefing that's mandatory. Thank you.
The way to do that is to suggest an agenda item, I think, on the council meeting. We probably can't do it for the next one now. Would you agree that would be a good idea, or what would your thoughts be?
The agenda for full council is you're quite right, councillor, is very busy. Obviously, we do all member briefings as well, which is, I suspect, possibly what you're.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, rather than a full council briefing. So certainly we'd be happy to do a themed approach to one of the regular all member briefing sessions on engagement and participation.
My concern is quite often they're full member briefing, but you have a choice. I think it needs to be mandatory because I think everybody needs to know this.
Yeah, I agree entirely. I think what we're very keen to make sure is that not only all the members of the committee are fully engaged with the progress they're making on the improvement plan, but also that all other members are kept up to date as well.
I'll bow to other people's authority to decide whether or not members can be mandated.
Thank you. Councillor,
Yes, I requested a briefing to full council for a presentation from No Wrong Door. At one stage, and I was told that was impossible to have that sort of thing at full council, and an all members briefing was the only way forward. And again, not everybody goes to that, and that's the frustration that unless you make it mandatory, half the people you want to listen are not going to be there.
I should say, training is mandatory, and this is training. So, I know we're a bit late into we should have this stuff when we first elected, but it is training, and I can't see any harm in making it mandatory. But that's up to the higher ups.
it's a question we can ask. Yeah, a point well made, I think. Any other, Councillor Kenny, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, for a little while. I'm just, this last 5 minutes of conversation, I'm a little bit frustrated with. You don't want quantity, you want quality. And if you try and push this onto councillors of yes, they're corporate parents and all the rest of it, but they got on with other things. There's people on this committee because they want to be on this committee. Yes, send a brief out, don't make it mandatory. I kind of struggle as well with saying call things back, get it back in 6 months and that sort of stuff for us to look at. What we should be doing is making recommendations to the cabinet member to ensure that that cabinet member is doing their job. So we should be making recommendations saying, look, have you done this? Have you done that? This report, it has gone to the cabinet member. So it's her role, her job to ensure it's implemented. It's not our job. It's our job to check that it's implemented and the cabinet member's doing their job. And I'm not having a dig at this particular cabinet member. What I'm saying is it is our job as a scrutiny committee to scrutinise the council as well as what's going on. So rather than call it back here all the time, it's a really simple conversation the chairman or vice chairman could have with the cabinet member and say, look, how are we getting on with this? And then you can report back. When you're talking about no open doors, no closed doors, go and knock on the door, go and speak to them. If you don't need to be trained for a day, people coming in and that sort of stuff, go in the door, knock on the door and speak to them. Okay, that's what we need to do. And then you'll hear the voice of the child. Quite often out and about and in the city, I speak to all sorts of different people and I hear lots of different messages. So rather than have a workshop where officers come along and tell you what you want to hear, go and knock on the door or go and speak to them. Please don't make more work for this committee because, I've had emails from councillors that are getting frustrated by workloads, and I thought you were going to say something about that earlier, but you haven't, obviously.
Yeah, and the reason I haven't, I'm going to do it when we come to the work programme, because I agree totally. I think we all share those frustrations, and we will be making those points, quite right. And when we come to do all the recommendations, then of course your view and how we recommend those actions are taken will be taken into account when we draw the recommendations and we'll vote upon it. Your point taken. Thank you. Councillor Hewitt.
I do think that it is a little like door-to-door sales for councillors to be knocking on doors and speaking to children. If they want to speak to us, they're quite welcome to do so. But I wouldn't agree with the suggestion that's just been made, and I suggest other members don't either. But one of the things that I wanted to say was that I think everybody in this room is in a totally new position, and that is of receiving an IRO report, and I think that that's probably also the cabinet member. And what I would praise here is just how difficult a read it is, because it's as if an essential part of the machine had been taken out and left aside and wasn't fulfilling its function, and basically putting that back into the motor should make the whole thing work an awful lot better, and I absolutely endorse and praise that, and I'm really, really pleased to see it here. And I like the assurances in the actual report where you say there will be improvement on this in the next report. You said that several times in the report, and I get that you get that there will be improvement, so that is a really good thing. Thank you.
Yeah, I totally endorse that. Yeah, the fact we've got a report and improvements recognised is a great step forward and very positive. We've had a great debate. I think we've probably answered all the questions, asked all the questions we want to do and have them answered. Diana, as cabinet member, is there anything you'd like to say before I ask committees to what recommendations that we've got?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just very briefly, yeah, it's very good to see this report at last. And yeah, so thank you, Matthew. And there's a lot of very useful information in there. And it's, as we all know, IROs are really, really important people in our council. And I'm really glad that you as a committee are keeping an eye on this, on the service. It won't be shelved, it won't be forgotten. Obviously, we don't have to wait for the next report to monitor and you know, keep an eye on and support what's going on. It's all embedded in the improvement plan, so that's really good. It's especially important for families as well, this role, and the voice of the child, as you were saying earlier, and for child-friendly care plans. So I'm also glad that we're reevaluating the role, because it is, you know, it needs to be given the status that it deserves. And also I'm glad that we're getting more legal support in the Directorate. That was overdue and is really important. And finally, I also picked up on Councillor Fagan's point about CAMS. And so just to say that, yeah, that emotional support is so important, and it obviously links very strongly with our relationships with our partners. And it's one of my priorities. Thank you.
Thank you. When we come to the work programme, I think looking at that area, mental health and well-being, is something we should look at as a priority for the scrutiny. I think quite a lot of people agree with that. Thank you very much. Right, let's get conclusions and from recommendations from members. I think I would suggest you to start off with that we do accept a report annually in the sort of timescale that the interim directors suggested for autumn next year would be produced annually for this committee to receive and scrutinise. That's the first important recommendation. You might want to word it different, but I think that's the gist of it. Secondly, that we are, all members are provided with a copy of the IRO manual. And I think the other thing we said was that we should have a workshop with the participatory officer and the role of the participatory officer, like we did today with the IRO, so we understand better as a committee the role of the participatory officer. That's a third recommendation, I think. Fourth one we agreed was that we would aim to produce, as far as possible, comparative data in future IRO reports with our either statistical neighbours or other councils from where we can find the data. And I think we also said that there were two issues of concern: except the health services or referrals, and that care plans weren't always being passed on to IROs, are things that we looked at on a shorter basis, and probably by the cabinet member in the first instance. Those were I picked up. Were there any other recommendations that committee members felt that we discussed that we should include?
Didn't say we'd have the voice of the child at the next meeting.
The voice of the child at the next meeting. Yeah, that was something that we said we would aim to include. A way in which we can do that, would that be something we could discuss between now and then.
Do we have to have a workshop first, Darrell? I can't remember.
Well, we've got the participatory workshop we said we'd have first.
Yeah, I'm conscious that we're going to have a conversation about the forward work plan, and that members want want the budget to be discussed at the next meeting, which may not lend itself to young people participation too much.
Yes, we are going to have a discussion. Members may not want the budget at the next meeting, but we are going to have a discussion of what the work plan would be and workshops beforehand. Yes. So, are there any other recommendations that we made that people want to have included, members of the committee? Do you think that captures it? Have you had a chance to get them down yet, Sarah?
I think so. Just,
Chair, Councillor Fagan.
Sorry, Tony, I missed your hand up. Thanks for telling me, Darrell. What have you got something to add?
Thanks, Chair. It was just the issue of the referrals and what have you. It is actually on our work plan, isn't it, for the 7th of December. I'm just trying to quickly look at the programme. I think there was an issue about is it mental health in schools? So perhaps that particular matter could be sort of added to for the work plan which we've got for the 7th of December. Yeah. Possibly that's too short a time, but it is the same, it's an extension of that topic.
Yes, you're quite right. That is included in the December list, and I think that would be sort of sensible having that conversation when we come to talk about the work plan.
Okay, thanks.
Is that okay? Thank you. Just remind us if we don't do it, I'm sure we will, but let's make sure we cover it then. Councillor Summers.
I would just like to see more input on the legal aspect of this, because there's not much in the report, and legal has a lot to do with any of this stuff, as we found out, and it'd be nice to get their feedback on how they go about checking stuff and what's in place that makes sure that mistakes are not made by, I'm not saying your staff are going to make mistakes, but legal can really benefit that. So it's just my.
Would you like to put that in words of a recommendation? Yeah.
Yes, yes, definitely. Yeah.
Is that okay? So.
sorry.
We all make mistakes, and yeah, we certainly in terms of the focus on the improvement plan through scrutiny meetings next year, we could ask for an update report from head of legal in relation to the changes that have been made over the last year and the impact, and also the processes that you follow as part of the theme for that.
It might be a recommendation out of the next item on the agenda.
Okay.
May I just suggest that we have something to do legal with the IRO, because we know that there's extra legal and there's need more funding put into legal, but what's being put into, what part of that's been put into IRO legal, because it's a separate package, isn't it? Because it's an outside source.
It is, but to my knowledge, we haven't actually had cause to call on it in this last year, because there hasn't been a circumstance where IROs have needed to seek independent legal advice. So it's a facility that's there, but one that one hopes never you need to have, because that would mean your dispute resolution and all of your attempts to reconcile dispute has fallen by the wayside. So there's a facility there, but to my knowledge, Matthew can correct, it's not been called on in this year, say.
I think it said there
were twice it's been called on.
There were no need to call on independent legal advice.
Yeah. So
we were told that this morning.
It's a very, very small number of times. So yeah, we perhaps we could think about it perhaps in the forward plan conversation.
Yeah, if that had been okay, would we be where we are today if that had been called on earlier? That's all I'm asking for. We're in pretty deep as far as where we are right now.
Yeah.
Everybody's all the staff have changed. We've got all new people. Maybe if IRO, and it was IRO before, I understand it just was simply very well hidden. Perhaps if they had there was a legal aspect, and if legal had been sought sooner, maybe it would have prevented some of the stuff that we're in. Anyway, that's just my feelings. Thank you.
Certainly, we all agree that having legal aspects of the improvement plan included in any review, and whether it's by individual topic areas such as RO, I think take sort your view, Darrell, that legal covers all aspects of the improvement plan, and that there are to do them independently might be taking too much time, but we do need to include all aspects of legal when we could look at the improvement plan generically, I think, no question.
I think that if there's a report on the legal support to the service overall, coming to scrutiny in the new year, it can include a section on the support for IROs.
Let's include the sections that legal impact upon and not do it in isolation.
Okay.
Is that okay? That's your question? Yeah, that's a good way of doing it. Councillor Hewitt.
Well, I just saw a bit of an exchange there, that there had been, IROs had cause to inquire of their own legal services twice. Is that right, Dara? Is that what I just saw this year?
Yeah.
And would that be in relation to their work, or somebody's complained about their work? I mean, basically, I get that probably their legal framework supports them in whether they're doing their work correctly. It isn't about, is that how it works? Is that?
No, it's about, on 2 occasions, IROs have had reason to seek independent legal advice on behalf of the child to clarify a situation which they've then helped use, shared with the service to help the service to get the right plan. So so
that's because our legal service weren't.
No, it's because the IRO and the service weren't clear about it, and the IRO in their role has the right to go and seek that legal advice to clarify that point.
So it's like getting a second opinion.
So it's almost a second opportunity
that
to
clarifies it for me.
And that's important. It's important that it's not part of the council legal service, because it is actually independent advice for the child, which might help drive the plan effectively.
So
It's not about decisions about whether the child is in care or not, but it may be something to do with the child's life.
That helps, that gives clarity. Thank you very much.
Section 3.4.1 in the report, which explains the 2 reasons. And it's interesting that one of the reasons was an IRO saying there didn't need to be an application to the courts. Council went ahead anyway, and the judge confirmed that they didn't actually need to go to court. So that's the RA is obviously doing a good job. Being overruled in that case, but nevertheless a job that was considered and a decision made on it. Councillor Summers.
But isn't that?
We'll wait for Sarah to finish writing the recommendations. I'll get this conversation, but yes.
But isn't that reason to know more about that aspect of IRO?
I think we covered that in saying we will make sure it happens.
I know, but if there's a.
And we capture that in the minutes, it will go down in our action tracker to make sure we do it, okay? Right, have we got them then listed? Would you like to read them out just please, Sarah? Can we put them on the screen?
On the screen, yeah.
Thank you. Can you read them out just please?
Just give me a second.
Oh, that's better, yes.
Right, so having reviewed the IRO report for 2021, the committee recommends that A, the committee receives the IRO report as an annual agenda item in future. B, the next iteration of the report include comparator data with statistical neighbours where this is available. C, that a workshop be arranged with a participatory officer on how to include the voice of the child in future meetings. D, that health partners be asked to attend a future meeting of the committee to discuss barriers for children and young people accessing CAMS or other therapeutic support and counselling. E, an update on progress be provided to the committee in 6 months' time. I've left that open, but that could be written, that could be in whatever format you feel is appropriate to that, bearing in mind pressure on the work programme. And that the update reports, which is to be provided on children's legal services, include information on legal support for the IRO service.
Is everybody happy that captures? Sorry, is everybody happy that captures everything? Councillor Hanson?
Yes, understood.
Yeah. Okay, someone like to propose we accept those recommendations. Councillor Summers, a seconder. Councillor Hanson, all those in favour? That's unanimous from those present. Thank you very much. That completes that item. Can I suggest we have a 5-minute break? And if so, if you all agree, everybody agreeable to that? Okay, thank you. Can I confirm that they're recording? Thank you, Democratic Services. Welcome back on to item 8 on the agenda, which is Children's Improvement Plans of Progress Update. This is to review the Director's Progress Update report. Just before we start that, I think just a few words about where we are with scrutiny on this. This improvement plan was obviously approved by Cabinet on the 28th of October. And so now we can review it, because as you know, we've been waiting for the improvement plan to come out so we can put together a comprehensive programme, including improvement plan items as well as our normal work plan items. There was a lot of positivity about the fact that we had an improvement plan. There was lots of good things about it. I pointed out at that meeting as Chair of Scrutiny there were a lot of really good things, but I picked out, as Scrutiny should, 2 or 3 things particularly that, as Scrutiny, we felt were issues that need to be further addressed. And in particular, we felt that Scrutiny still wasn't fully engaged with the process of the improvement plan, and it came out and the plan didn't actually reflect Scrutiny's role as much as it might. In the context of that, Gladys was instrumental in helping us to say, well look, maybe we should be present at the improvement panel meetings, which we were told, we agreed originally wouldn't be, because that might be a way of greater integration of Scrutiny into the whole process. So the Chair, myself and Vice Chair will be at the next 2 of those board meetings. Thank you very much guys for enabling that, to see if and how that might enable us to feel more integrated as observers rather than participants, because we felt that that might be a way of making sure we were seen and noticed and being aware that we should be more fully engaged. I think that's a brief summary of where we were and the points we made at the Cabinet meeting, and it has been taken on board, which is really great news. So, without more ado, can I hand over to Darryl, who I must point out is no longer the interim director, but the permanent director of Children's Services. So,
well done, Darryl.
Congratulations, Darryl, on that new role. And I'll make sure I get it right in future. But can I hand over to you to give your update on the improvement plan progress, please?
Thanks, Chair. Can I just assure members that didn't happen over the coffee break? So good afternoon, members. The purpose of this paper is to provide an opportunity to reflect on what's been done since the non-statutory improvement notice was put in place in May this year, and for members to indicate what specific reports they would wish to see in the future. A detailed performance and outcomes report is already scheduled for the next scrutiny meeting that has a focus on improvement very early in the new year, and will be a regular feature in the forward plan, subject to the conversation later this afternoon about the forward plan. As the Chair said, the strategic plan was endorsed by Cabinet on 28th of October and has been submitted to the Department for Education in accordance with our non-statutory improvement notice. Members, including Scrutiny Committee members, contributed to the development of that plan, for which we're very grateful, to a number of workshops. At this point in time, since the non-statutory notice was imposed, we have successfully completed all actions stipulated in the notice, the primary focus of which was to establish an improvement board, a robust governance structure, and to ensure that the necessary resources are in place. An improvement board is in place, chaired by Gladys Rose-White, here observing today, and it was agreed, as you've already indicated, that both the Chair and Vice Chair will attend the next 2 meetings as observers. Each month, the Director provides an update to the Board in their capacity as Director, and going forward, that report will include an update on the overall progress of the overall improvement plan by highlight and exception. You'll know when we look at the plan itself, it's a very detailed plan, so what we won't do at every meeting is go through things line by line. Similarly, every month the Board will receive a performance report from the Assistant Director for Children's Social Care. A staff reference group has also been established and will routinely both report to the Board and be represented on the Board. The Leader of the Council, the Cabinet Member and the Chief Executive are active members of the Board, as are representatives of our staff and other agencies. The Department for Education recently led a 6-month review of the non-statutory improvement notice, and there were no surprises for the service. The non-statutory notice continues. It was always for a minimum of 12 months at least. and will continue until such time as we've had our next Ofsted inspection, after which the status of the improvement notice will be reviewed. The Department for Education representatives were very clear that there is confidence in the direction of travel and in the decisions that we've made so far and in our plan. And members will note that we've recently received £1.5 million of grant money from the Department for Education to speed up some of the improvement activity that we're undertaking at the moment. But we're very clear, the Department for Education, that the focus now very much is on not so much stabilising the service and putting an infrastructure in place, but on delivering on the improvement plan and delivering in terms of improved outcomes for children and young people. The Cabinet will be reviewing progress on a quarterly basis, and full council will receive updates 3 times during the municipal year. Scrutiny have previously agreed to increase the frequency of its meetings during 2022-23 and will consider progress against the improvement plan at each alternate meeting. The plan is shared again today for information, and members are asked to consider areas of work for further scrutiny activity, reflecting your priority actions. A workforce report is already scheduled for the January budget meeting of the Scrutiny Committee, and a performance report will be received at the first of the improvement focus meetings in February and thereafter on a regular basis. So I commend the report and ask for the committee to consider areas of work for further scrutiny going forward.
Thank you, Darryl. Right, I see you've got your hand up, Councillor Kenyon, so let's go to you first for questions.
Thank you, Chairman. I welcome this, and I welcome, you know, the measures that we've been put in, because it gives us a really good opportunity to get this right. I think over the last 10 years we haven't been getting it right, so I'm really pleased this comes to us now. As a scrutiny committee, what I'd be interested to know is what should our role be? Has anyone asked what should the scrutiny committee do? Because a lot of this is about governance. To get out of these measures, a lot of it's about control and governance. So has anyone actually asked what the scrutiny committee should be doing rather than what we think we should be doing?
Well, it's a good question, yes. We have asked that question ourselves, and given the improvement plan particularly, it was time to review the terms of reference of scrutiny, and that is something we've said we want to do. We haven't actually done that yet, but I think that'll be something we should do urgently. I think that's the point you're making. What exactly are our terms of reference and what we should be doing? That is something we've agreed we should be updating sooner rather than later. So let's make sure we put that as an action to make sure we do actually define exactly what we should be doing. And you made some good points about things that shouldn't necessarily come to scrutiny but can be done in different ways and don't have to come to full meetings. And I'm hopeful that between this meeting and the next one we can bottom that out. It's been quite frustrating to date that we've gone from meeting to meeting, not actually having a cohesive programme to go forward with. Now we've got the improvement plan, we've got all the content that we need to look at, and we should now put a structure in place which includes saying what we should be looking at, what we shouldn't, and what should be done other ways, like some of the points you made earlier. And I know Darryl wants to add to that.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Kenyon. I think that's a very pertinent question right now. I think so the LGA, of course, are going to do some work with scrutiny over the coming weeks and months, which I think will help build that resource. If I can have a go at answering your question direct, for me and for officers that will attend scrutiny, it's absolutely in our interest that scrutiny is effective. So I see your role absolutely about holding our feet to the fire and ensuring that we are delivering on what I've said we're going to deliver on. But also you have a key role, as far as I see it, to help us drive the improvement agenda. To make so if you see that the improvement journey and the improvement activity is stalling for whatever reason, then there's a key role in terms of making recommendations to Cabinet and full council. So I think the relationship between officers in the circumstances that we're in with an improvement journey and scrutiny is absolutely key in making sure that we keep that pace of improvement, but also that you help us to drive the improvement plan in terms of making recommendations to council and cabinet.
Really, thank you for that. But you said that word journey, and as soon as you say that, I'm like, oh God. But what I will say about that, without saying that word, is quite right. The cabinet members, the cabinet are looking at this. They're all over this. And what we don't want to be doing is duplicating things. We need to be doing things slightly differently. And the other point I was trying to make is we need to show that we're improving things. We need to show that we're doing things to make sure the children in our county are safe. Now, is there any guidelines, from government what we should be doing? Because we want to get out of these measures, and I say governance is a big part. So if there's there is a part for scrutiny to play, but what part is it?
So again, I'll defer to the work that the LGA is going to do. I think they're better placed than I am to help define that and use the existing government framework.
Yeah, I think I can add some content to that. As you all know, I went on a 2-day Management Essentials course as the first part of the engagement with the LGA who came and presented the offer of training and development at our last meeting. Fortunately, Jenny couldn't go along because she wasn't very well, but we're hoping to get on to the course as well. And as part of that exercise, we're one of 3 authorities that are working with the LGA to a new assessment review programme, if you like, of what it is that scrutiny should be doing and how we should be doing it. And we're part way through filling that assessment form in, which will then inform which we'll share with Jenny and I, that is, a part way through completing that. As soon as that's done, we'll share with Gladys and the LGA about, do you agree this is a sensible assessment of where we are, the question we should be asking. Then we'll share it with committee members for your thoughts on it, and then we can make sure we produce a programme which does the work that, Jim, you'll be happy with, that we should be doing as scrutiny. So there's a programme we're going through. It's been quite frustrating, it's taken some time, but we are getting it is happening, and hopefully we can speed things up. You can't, Jim, I think. I hope that wasn't a discussion. I'm sure not. While we're waiting, has anybody else got any comments or questions to us?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Tammy, yes, I didn't see, yes.
That's fine, thanks, Chair. I mean, you did share the LGA document with us, on the role of scrutiny, which I assume is the document that you're referring to, that you and Councillor Hewitt are going to complete. And I think that was a really useful document in terms of being able to kind of focus the mind on exactly sort of what it is. So if that's the piece of work that we're going to continue with, then I certainly welcome that. Thanks.
Yes, it is, and it's going to make a long reading for Gladys and Claire when they get it, because we made a lot of points. But I was trying to remember the other 2 authorities. I think there are 3: Medway, Dudley, and ourselves, who are trialling this assessment approach with the LGA. And actually, we spent quite a lot of time on it already, and it's really informative and really makes you think about just how we're doing in scrutiny, what we think could be improved, and what we need to make sure we do our job better. And hopefully when we share it with you, you'll agree we've pretty comprehensively addressed all the issues, but I'm sure you'll have some things to raise as well. I would hope we'll get that to you. Well, we need to pass it by Gladys and Claire first, I think, within the next week. And it's me that's holding up, not Jenny, she's done her bit. My only excuse is I'm moving house and that's distracting me a bit, but that's not a really good excuse. But we are working on it, we've put a lot of work into it, and we should be getting that. I would hope within a couple of weeks you'll see it, before the next meeting anyway. Jenny, you wanted to add something?
So, yeah, just to confirm, we have had multiple phone calls about this self-assessment thing, going back and forth, so the work is in his head, it's just got to get on the paper. So, yeah, I'd like to just comment on the improvement plan, because a little bit like, I welcome the assurance in the room that scrutiny is allowed to hold people's feet to the fire, so that feels an excellent result. But it's not honestly reflected in the improvement plan in the same way, a little bit like what we're saying about dusting off the role of IRO and giving it the status it deserves. New officers have walked into a situation where scrutiny has been really put left in a dark cupboard somewhere in relation to issues that have gone on in the past. And I'm really keen, going forward, that why that happened is understood. And We have a question from a member of the public, which is about, it's a year since the investigation into why the Cso report was hidden from scrutiny. This lies at the heart of a broken contract between democratically elected members and officers. And you officers here in the room today are making a very good start at mending that contract. But until we have those answers, we have a year, so then the investigation went out to an independent person, but under a tour that was constructed by legal. Now CYPS here redrafted those terms of reference, but to date we have no assurance that those redrafted terms will be used, which calls to question whether that independent investigation can be called independent. So, I have some questions about clearing out the cupboard before we put the new things in. And I think that needs to be out there in the public domain so that people know about that. So I'll go back to the report that we've got here. What I see here is a report that asks questions like, ensure that council's scrutiny function is operating effectively. We're going quite a long way down that route with Gladys and with Claire helping the chair and I and the rest of the scrutiny. And the questions that I've heard today from scrutineers have been absolutely excellent, and I've got no doubt that we're going to improve. But this relationship has to be built upon absolute trust, and that's what I'm calling for here in this room today, that trust is established by having the clarity of what happened in the past. In addition, I'd like these RAG ratings, please, to be adopted by scrutiny. So the blue, complete, the red, off track, the amber behind. I think they're very useful, and that's a recommendation, please. I think that would be useful for us. Sorry, I've had one of my teacher's diatribes, so you'll have to excuse me.
I think it's very valuable because it was forthright from the heart.
Vice Chair, will you take it a moment? I'm back in the room now.
I know, I've noticed you're back. I was going to come back to you, don't worry. I know
no worries, I thought you cut me off, my prime. I'm done anyway, but thank you.
No, I was going to come back to you, but in the meantime, Jenny had decided to raise a point. So you're done, you put your point in, you got your answer.
Jenny, have you got your paperwork straight? I wish Boris Johnson had me yesterday to talk over while I get the paperwork straight.
Do not compare me to Boris Johnson.
Thanks for coming back to us. Glad you made it back, Jenny. And actually, I was going to add to what Jenny said, because in doing our assessment, we've got a few questions of that nature which will be holding officers' feet to the fire more than I think has been in the past, because we think there's a real need for a culture change. As we said right from the beginning, we recognise, and reinforcing Jim's point, that we should be scrutinised bottom up from the experience of the young people and their carers and social workers. And to be honest, traditionally in the past it's been more top down and driven perhaps more by officers than it should have been, and not enough by scrutiny. So it needs to be much more of a teamwork where we as scrutiny are saying, well, actually we want to talk about this, and we should be independent minded enough to do that. I think we recognise that actually changing that culture, even if it's recognised that we need to, is a slow and difficult process. People get used to working the way they work, and culture is a very difficult thing to change. I think that's what we're going through, and we recognise that's part of the problem. And as I say, in the assessment, I think you'll see we've been probably even quite brutal about some of the things that need to be done differently in order to change culture. But I totally endorse what Jenny's saying. From meetings like today, there's clearly a recognition of the need to change, and a lot of good steps being taken to do that, which is very positive. But as scrutiny, we should look at the things that need to be improved, and hopefully there are a minority of things, and recognising all the good things, but not be negative about saying these are a dozen things that need to go right, but that they're part of making sure we become excellent in what we do, not just good in what we do. So I endorse totally Jenny's comments. Did you want to add something else?
Yeah, so I'm resisting talking about Peppa Pig here, but let's go to page 53 or page 27. You don't need to refer to it, it's Appendix 4. It says key sources of information to secure a whole system approach. And very much like what we've been requiring here on scrutiny, which is to have that from lived experience voice in the room. I think there's been an omission of feedback from that third sector on how the whole system approach will get quality assurance and performance management. So it's got practice observations, appreciative inquiry, learning from serious cases, and we've already seen a demonstration of that today in our briefing from Charmaine when she talked about there being some sort of a glitch in an ICT programme, and that was corrected remarkably quickly in the space of, I don't know, a couple of weeks after they found the problem. But what's not in here is feedback from the third sector, and I think that would be very valuable to the Improvement Board.
Something else to add, I think, to what Jenny just said, and the point you made, Carol, very early on in our weekly briefings with Paul Walker, Chief Exec, we made the point to be recognised that actually one of the reports that should drive the work of scrutiny is the Ofsted report. And two particular aspects of that were resources, and making sure we have adequate resources, and sustainability of service delivery, and that should drive part of the focus of the things we should be scrutinising. So that, and you mentioned that point a few minutes ago, which indicates that, you know, scrutiny and officers and the work we do coming closer together in understanding exactly how we should be changing to do the job as thoroughly as we need to do as part of the improvement plan. So I think that's all very positive as well. Any other committee members got any questions to ask, points to raise? I mean, we obviously have had all other members briefing for the public who listen to this, so we've all had briefings, we've had the reports, and we've already asked a lot of questions before, so the fact that you'd expect a lot of those answers to be given before today, but we have some recommendations to make in taking this forward. Anybody got any other questions or points before we draw up our recommendations? Diana, as the cabinet member, anything you want to add before we do that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, I echo your warm welcome to Darryl as our DCS. It's very good to have him in post, and it's really good that we can feel more stability now in the Directorate, which is really good. And I was particularly pleased also in this report I'm really pleased about the staff reference group, and that's going to, I trust that's going to go from strength to strength. I also echo what Darryl said about the role of scrutiny, and it does feel as if we're in a new phase about that, in that now, which is also really positive. And Councillor Hewitt was talking about scrutiny in the past and where you fit in now with the improvement plan and everything. And I think the key to that is also the committee being more proactive than it has been in the past, which you're definitely doing. So that's all really good too.
Yes, that's the point I made too. Thank you.
Just two more brief things. Firstly, I'm very sorry, but I have to leave the meeting at the end of this item, but thank you very much for having me. And finally, the phrase special measures has been used a couple of times in the meeting. I just want to point out that what we have from the DFE is a non-statutory improvement notice, and that's not the same as special measures. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jenny. Yes, I think demonstrating our proactivity, we were proactive with the LGA in saying, look, we need your help in getting on board with the offering plan, and that was obviously, we moved forward with that because we were proactive, and there's no secret between being proactive and getting things done. Obviously we were in the learning curve the first few weeks and months as new chair and deputy chair and committee, but we're getting more and more finding our feet and being confident we need to be proactive and knowing how we can be, given that in terms of reference and the interchange of roles. So it's a case of just growing in confidence as you get more experience, clearly. So thank you for that. Councillor Summers, you were going to raise a point.
Yeah, it's about schools. For the past few years, schools have been, to council, I think almost secondary, has been very controlled by officers. And when I've asked questions, it's been given a glib answer, etc., etc. And usually the answer is we can't control. We have very little control over it, and in some parts we have no control. I don't think that should prevent us making sure that we know what's going on in schools more than we do, and especially with mental health issues. As you'll hear all over the news right now, mental health problems are increasing amongst young people. Perhaps if we'd got on this wagon a number of years ago, we wouldn't be having the problems that we have now. So I think we need to be more involved with schools, we need to be more, well, period, that's it, thank you.
When we come to look at the work programme, you'll see schools, mental health in schools. It's one of the issues that we'll discuss as part of our work programme.
But I'm not saying in the children improvement plan, that's all I'm saying, and
Oh,
it is part of the
it's not in
job.
yes.
No, and I think it needs to be, because it's not here right now, and to me, it's a sore point. And, you know, we've got funding gone into secondary, but nothing into primary. There's a little bit gone into primary, about 3 schools in Herefordshire are involved with mental health, but very small, very little. I really think we need to be pushing this more and more, especially in primary school, because the earlier we kept this, the better, and we're not getting it early enough. Thank you.
So you'd like to make a recommendation that there should be more mention and work done in the mental health in schools?
Yeah.
That's it, okay. I'm sure Sarah's captured that. Darryl.
Just to pick up on Councillor Summers' point, obviously the focus of the improvement plan is on the quality of practice in children's social care services. So education doesn't really feature in the plan. That's the focus from the Department for Education and from Ofsted. When we talk about the forward work plan in the next agenda item, I know that Kerry Morgan, my Assistant Director for Education, is very keen for schools to have a higher profile in the forward work plan, and happy to bring papers there. But yeah, so schools are very much mentioned as one of the key partners in our improvement plan, and I met a group of head teachers earlier today to talk about the improvement plan, but of course its primary focus is on the quality of practice in children's social care, so I don't want to conflate the two.
I know, but if we get it there, aren't we getting it earlier than we would normally?
Yeah, it's just I think we're talking the same language.
Yeah, we're talking, Councillor, I think we recognise the point, we need to look at it, and I think it's a matter of emphasis very often. It's easy when you read a report to tell you what you've written it, but when people outside comment, if it's a matter of emphasis, that is often more important than the intention is there. I think the emphasis on mental health, people saying there should be more emphasis on it. And the other thing I mentioned in Cabinet as well, which somebody in the public arose to me, there wasn't enough mention of SEND education. I think we agreed that was something that hadn't been perhaps as addressed as fully as it might have been in the improvement plan.
And again, the focus of the Department for Education Improvement Notice isn't on our response to SEND. That's covered in a different activity in a different group. Now, clearly, as the director, I need to cover all of those with scrutiny going forward. So we'll find the right place, but the improvement plan will lose its focus, I believe, if we try to include all the other things that actually aren't part of the Department for Education Improvement.
Good insight, thank you. I understand that. It's important that we in scrutiny recognise the difference. Just a second, Councillor Kennan, you had your hand up, and then Councillor Fagan.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me back in. I'm just picking up what Councillor Summers said. It is an issue, and pastoral care. I think schools at the moment focus too much on education. I just like a child to be educated enough and be kind. But the pastoral care in schools has really taken a back seat. I see this secondary. How many have got secondary schools in my ward? And I've got 2 or 3 primary schools, but the secondary school in my ward certainly. The pastoral care side of things has fallen off, and that needs to be improved. But again, that's not for today. But I just want to flag that up. There is something that we can push on the agenda. So I completely agree with what Councillor Summers is saying.
Yeah, I confirm that actually it is on our work programme agenda. But I think taking Darryl's point of understanding the difference in the improvement plan per se, another important aspect of children's services we also need to be scrutinising, and that's why getting our work programme right is so important to do as soon as possible. Councillor Fagan, then I'll come back to you.
Yeah, thank you. It's just that point about the improvement plan, and what concerns me every time I sort of look at the situation in Herefordshire is that, and I go back to the figures from 2010, I think that the children, the looked after children in Herefordshire have doubled since 2010. And for me, sort of looking at exactly, I understand the importance of picking up the pieces after things have fallen apart for families, but actually the crucial bit for me is how we support families at the beginning of the journey, so that we don't end up in this situation where we continually we're currently not under resourced because of the situation that we're in, but it's a very expensive business trying to support families after they have broken. And what can we do to actually support families at the beginning of their journey in Herefordshire so that we do not get to this point?
Absolutely, as you raised an email to me this morning about making sure we intervene as early as possible, similarly with early years help. Everything you can do to address an issue before it becomes a costly one is obviously something we should making sure we face attention to, and that's where we should be scrutinising where things are beginning to go wrong, as opposed to when they got wrong, how we can put them right. Thank you. Councillor Summers.
I go back, one that's always on my agenda is the perinatal. Since they started a year and a half ago, it's been very successful. I think I visited them in March, and by that time, the 3 months, they had about 100 mothers. Now, that's where we need to be catching the children, I'm afraid, is with the mothers in the early years.
I agree entirely, but just make sure this is about the improvement plan aspects of it.
Oh, yeah, but this is
not an improvement plan. I know you argue they're linked,
okay.
But I think the point Darrell make about making sure we understand the difference.
I get back to Councillor Summers' point. There is one of the 5 programmes is Right Help, Right Time, and as that develops during next year, it can be broadened to encompass a whole load of things. So I'm not saying they're all exclusive of the improvement plan. Our need and our capacity to get earlier intervention, right help at the right time, in a better place than it currently is key to sustainability of our improvement going forward. So absolutely get the point that can be included as we develop that programme of work.
Thank you. You all know Councillor Summers' passion for this area.
Can I just add, we've had difficulty getting perinatal to come to any of the groups that we've had. I'm on the Herefordshire Worcestershire mental health group. And I think we're going to get them the next trip. Has taken about a year, as Councillor Crockett would adhere to. And both Councillor Crockett and I have visited, and we're both disappointed in the communication between them and the council. I'm not sure how much is going on now, but it's been very poor. Sorry about that.
It's okay, something to include, as Darrell said, in one of the pillars of the actual work programme, the wellbeing side of it, is something for us to review, make sure we have. Councillor Hugh, you next.
It's just point of order. I would not like the message to go out from this committee that we believe that pastoral care has fallen away in schools in this county, because I know as a teacher how very hard our schools have worked to actually redress and bump up their pastoral care for children, especially during the pandemic. I know we've been under tremendous pressure in relation to results-driven education for years, but I think the pandemic has been a great wake-up call to educators and to government in what it means to actually look after each other as communities. So I believe the schools in this county have been doing their utmost.
Very well pointed out, Mary, and I think we should emphasise that it's always difficult in scrutiny when we seem to be critical. We're doing possibly critical, but we should always reflect the real hard work that's done on the ground by people, and that's part of the reason we want to make sure we hear their voice more effectively in doing scrutiny. Councillor Hanson.
Can I just make a suggestion?
Thank you very much, Gladys, for joining us. Thank you, everyone.
I don't know if anybody listened to Thought for the Day on Radio 4 this morning. I do suggest you actually get a copy or go on YouTube, because it's very relevant to what we're talking about.
Thank you. Right, we've had quite a good debate. I see no more hands up. Let's go on to recommendations. Did you want to add anything?
If I might, just on the subject of schools, especially in my new role, can I just say, certainly as of this week, there are no schools now in special measures of any type of school in Herefordshire, and testimony to the group of head teachers who've worked so hard, but also to recognise, actually, although they may have had a lower profile than this committee in recent months, head teachers and the teams in our schools have had an amazing 2 years since the outbreak of COVID early last year. And we often talk and hear in the media of the exhaustion of the NHS. I just want to recognise from our schools colleagues just how tired they are right now and how they've had to work differently and tirelessly over the last 18 months. And they're also trying very hard to keep schools open whilst COVID is still around.
Yeah, I totally endorse that. It's an important point, but we must also emphasise how much you recognise the work and compassion and commitment people have in really difficult circumstances. My own town of Ledbury, both primary and secondary school, they performed absolute wonders during COVID, and still are, under huge pressure and often short-minute adjustments. They're working really hard at the moment, and our job is to help make their job even more effective, obviously. Thank you, Darryl, for that. Right, we've got, I think, all the questions asked the people got today. Shall we go through the recommendations then? Did you manage to capture some, Sarah, as we went along?
I have, yeah.
Are you ready to show us?
Let me put that up. What I've got so far. A bit bigger. Okay, right. So the point about the RAG rating, I think we'll capture that as an action. We can just pick that up straight away. So I don't think that needs to be a recommendation. But I've picked up that the committee's recommended that feedback from the third sector be recognised as an additional source of information informing the whole system approach to quality assurance and performance management. And that work on mental health in schools be highlighted in the committee work programme. I think as we've noted it is already included in there. So
For people who read it, what would the third sector actually mean?
Expert by experience, you could put so.
It's a bit like it.
Wasn't that
So easy to have.
having children?
So typically that would be charities, community groups, and perhaps experts by experience, because we've already got feedback from families, our key partner agencies, frontline practitioners and children in there. So I think the difference is community groups and charity.
Yeah, that's a really coherent and easy understood set of words to explain what it means to people really. Thank you. Okay, that's a good expansion of that. I also noted what Councillor Hewitt said, that we should adopt the RAG rating.
Yeah, we'll capture that as an action
Okay,
point
fine,
rather than a
right.
recommendation, so we can just implement that.
I think those are the two key ones on recommendations, weren't they? Did anybody have anything we missed of that? Because as Sarah and Kath Jenny quite say, we've got an action list as well as a recommendation list, and we keep them separate. Everybody agree that captures the essence of our recommendations? Councillor Summers?
No, I just want, I'm on a COVID committee and we have a teacher on the COVID, I think he's from Ledbury. And you really get to hear what's going on in the schools. And I'm just wondering if we should have teachers at any of the scrutiny meetings. Some of the information he has is is fantastic, and I don't think we as lay people really know as much as what's going on.
An
In the
advert's gone
schools?
out for a teacher.
Pardon?
Sorry, an advert's gone out.
You want to add something to what Councillor
So an advert has gone out, this is right, Sarah, isn't it, for a co-op team from secondary school and a co-op team from primary school to be on this committee.
Yes,
Okay.
as we agreed to do.
Can you please let,
It's been frustrating, it's taken a long time.
yeah, can you please let the committee know the next time you do that? Because, I've been pushing for it for a while, it's not out there yet, I haven't seen it.
Haven't seen what they had.
Yeah.
It's in the went out a couple of days ago.
Okay.
But we've been chasing for it quite a lot
But
of
it would have
weeks.
been nice to know that it was going out, so I could have highlighted it and sent it out.
Yeah.
Because as I mentioned, in the COVID group, that the workplace and the schools comes up quite a bit. And what they're doing in the schools is absolutely phenomenal, I'm just wondering.
Actually, at the last meeting, we did agree that it needs to be acted on rapidly. I
Thank
haven't
you.
mentioned it yet, but it has only been done just this week, and the advert's gone out. With that, I can promise you a lot of pressing, both from members of the public and ourselves. It's been a staff and resource issue, but still from the outside world, unacceptable it's taken so long, but it is actually happening now. And I hope we'll have somebody as Scrutiny representing that group sooner rather than later.
To be fair, I think probably it will come up when we look at the action log, because we'll see it on there.
It is on the action
Yeah.
log. If you look at the action log, you'll see it's on there actually. Okay, somebody propose we accept those two recommendations, please. Councillor Hanson, seconded.
I don't mind it.
Councillor Summers. All those in favour? Thank you. That's complete. That item on the agenda is complete. Thank you. I think, Diana, that worked within your timescale.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks a lot for joining us.
Okay.
Okay, Councillor needs to go as well. Can we call the cabinet member and councillor at the meeting at the end of that work? We need to carry on. Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Dana. Right, move on to item 9 on the agenda, the work programme review. This is to review the work programme for 2021-22 and responses to recommendations made. Well, as I said, we aren't actually in a position yet to look at a structured work programme. The next meeting is actually only a couple of weeks away, which gives us limited time for officers to produce reports that we can review thoroughly. I think the big question is whether they can produce reports now with Carol just before the meeting to say, is that mental health, for example, was one of the issues we had down in the next meeting and wanted to cover. So I think, Darryl, you're worried that we can't get a comprehensive report sufficient for scrutiny to effectively look at it by the next meeting?
I think so. You'd previously agreed that that there was one element of mental health in schools which was going to be a briefing note, and then the other element, which is health and well-being, is actually the Director of Public Health's annual report. So I think to do justice to the points that committee have raised in today's meeting, we need to put it to not knock it too far in advance, but we need to allow officers from other agencies as well to prepare a report that answers the questions or comments that have been raised today and be able to attend the scrutiny. They won't be able to do that for the 7th, simply because we'd have to circulate those papers by close of play next Monday.
The next meeting would be January. Just so that members are aware of how we might manage the mental health scrutiny issue. Are you suggesting it could be done by
That's an improvement.
So, well, January, if I'm correct, will focus on budget and MTFS, and then probably we'll be able to get one other real substantive item in there in the January thing. We had suggested that would be workforce, but that's in your gift to change that around.
Workforce issues and resource issues. Councillor Summers.
I fully agree with Darryl. This mental health covers too much to be rushing into it. They have so much work on their hands right now, catching up with everything. I'm quite happy to take it later, as long as we do. We almost need to leave a full session for mental health because it covers from perinatal right through to schools, etc. So I'm quite happy about that.
It could be a themed meeting,
Yeah.
and invite reports from a range of different bodies.
So I'm fully agree with that.
Thank you.
And that's not like
Councillor Fagan, you also wanted this to be raised urgently as item. Would that make sense to you as well?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
We don't have a February date in the diary at the moment, I don't think. We have a January date and we have a March date, but it should be fitted in between those two dates. Would that work for you, Diane, getting reports produced?
If we're clear, so my I guess there's taking some steer from Democratic Services, which are the alternate months which will focus on improvement and which are the alternate months which will focus on Scrutiny's main work programme, and then it'll be easier to slot some of this stuff.
Today was mainstream.
Yeah.
January 1 is meant to be improvement.
Okay.
March 1 will be mainstream as well, because we haven't allocated a February date yet.
Okay.
So we need to add a February date if we agree as a committee that we add that to our work programme.
the second week in January is Blue Monday. So as close to February as possible would be ideal because it's the worst time of year for suicides.
Okay, so halfway between Tuesday 22nd of March and Tuesday 11th of January, we have a mainstream meeting which looks at mental health. Would that be okay with you, Councillor Fagan, and sufficient time to review it, given the officers' time as well to produce a meaningful report for us to scrutinise?
Sorry, Chair, can you just repeat the date?
Yeah, we haven't fixed the date in February. We've got a date of the 11th of January, which is a improvement plan meeting. The March one would normally be our mainstream one. We haven't fixed the date in February. We said we would normally try one every month, and that could be one where we could look at mental health otherwise we leave it till March the 22nd and don't have a February meeting. It's up to this committee to take into account. Because I know, I'm generally by both the representations to fully understand that. Whilst we know that we have to scrutinise the improvement plan and the work programme, having meetings every month is getting difficult for some of the members to accommodate. We've got other jobs and other commitments.
Yep.
So we haven't got a February date, and for that reason, that would mean going to March before we would be able to look at the mental health issue. So I'm open to members' views on how often you think we should be having these meetings, and do you agree we should include a February one? And if so, then we could look at it for mental health.
Well, Chair, if I can just say thank you, because I realise that you're referring to me because I'm one of those sort of working members as well. But I do think that it is an important issue. I mean, I'm very happy to take a steer from officers on, you know, as to when it is likely that we can kind of get the best report, because I think that that's important as well. I mean, if it requires an additional meeting, then I think it's a really important issue, and you know, I'll have to say yes.
Okay, I know Councillor Kenyon, you've made comments like Graham Andrews as well, which we've all had emails about the concern about managing within people's timescales, frequent meetings, and added to that workshops, how very useful it was this morning, but having that extra workload is proving quite difficult for people to manage with other commitments. Do you think we should be having a meeting every month? Would you accept that, and having alternate improvement and mainstream ones, given the experience we've had over the last few months of regular meetings every month and that becoming an issue for people? I just want to make sure we're all comfortable about going with the commitment we made at the beginning of the year that we would have meetings every month and double them. But given that people are finding it quite difficult, we need to review just is that something we still want to do. Jim.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, in that, I don't think there's a massive rush for it to come forward, but I'd perhaps ask Daryl to contact schools as best he can and ask about this. I mentioned about pastoral care, what things they're actually doing and what they're putting in place, because that might be a bigger report and quite a good thing to do. But contact individual schools and see what they're actually doing to help with children's mental health. And I think, David, you possibly agree it'd be better to wait until we've got those answers, and then we can look at what schools are doing well and what schools aren't doing well, because we can look at documentation, we can say we should be doing this, but actually on the ground is where it's really important. And it, perhaps if Daryl could do that piece of work, I think that would benefit everybody.
Yeah, is that something you?
It's certainly something I know that Kerry Morgan will be very keen to do as part, and if we include that as part of a themed approach to mental health and mental health approaches and wellbeing, then I'd suggest probably March is the better date then if we're going to get schools and others. I'm just conscious of the Christmas term break and things like that. So I think March would be a better time to allow the committee to give it its full attention and to get some quality reports.
So we put that pencil in for the 22nd of March then, 22nd of March meeting. And I think Councillor Summers, Tony, that would probably satisfy both of you that we wait a bit longer to get a more comprehensive report than doing.
So, well, yeah, the main thing is to cover it well. There's quite a bit of, there's a few scrutiny meetings, scrutiny task and finish groups actually on mental health in schools, mental health in daycares. We went to Gloucester and all kinds of stuff. And we also did stuff on camps. We went to the GP practice on the A49. They do quite a bit of camps. So there is some material there that you might want to look at that we've done over the last 4 years actually, and which really wasn't followed up, may I say. We did the work.
Thank you. No, Jenny, you went
Well, I just wanted to say really that it's the feedback I've heard from schools overlaps with the evidence in the IRO report that ongoing referrals through to mental health services is where things are stalling.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it indicates that there's a current problem with possibly capacity in the NHS, or I don't know where that is. But I sort of think, you know, we keep saying we're post-COVID, aren't we? But we're still in a difficult situation with COVID. So and teachers are having, especially with the very young children, but also with adolescents and stuff, they're having a lot of difficulty in schools with pupils whose mental stability has been affected by the pandemic. So I think it's urgent, but if we can't draw anything sensible and effective together, given the workload, I think we'll have to stick with March. But it does overlap with the improvement journey, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and can I just comment on the post-COVID comment? Obviously, the rates in our schools and rates amongst children in Herefordshire are high, and schools are struggling to stay. Some schools are struggling to stay open because of the rates amongst their staff teams. So I think that message, we need to be giving the message for people, especially as we start to get into crowded situations over the next few weeks in the run-up to Christmas, to continue to wear a face mask where possible, and to take appropriate precautions, and to get a booster if you're entitled to a booster.
Can I go back to the subject of, do committee members agree we should continue with what we said at the beginning of the year, that we would aim to hold meetings monthly, alternately between improvement and Main Street? Because at the moment, once we get to December, or the January meeting, after that, the only meetings in place are the bi-monthly ones. That's correct, isn't it, Sarah?
Yeah.
So we have to decide, do we continue to implement bi-monthly meetings, as we said we would do, but given the representations we've had from people saying that's proving quite difficult, can we make a decision that we will do that and put a February date in the diary and an April date in the diary, which we haven't done yet? Is that something you're willing and agreeable to us doing?
As long as I'm not in the hospital, I'll be here every
So
time.
you're in favour of that, Councillor Summers. Councillor Jones?
Yes, I'm in favour. I can't what might come up, but I do understand, but from both sides, with Councillor Jones and Tony saying about commitment and everything. So it can be sometimes difficult. As I said earlier, I welcome the training that we had this morning, and that was absolutely excellent. If it can be done over Zoom and stuff like that, and a short, condensed period, that was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, that was part of the plan, wasn't it? That we would
Yeah.
have monthly meetings and we would have workshops like that, which are both training and also inform us to better scrutinise each meeting, and that worked really well this morning. That's an extra commitment of time.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether we possibly could have, I don't know, evening sessions for workshops, for example. I know that's then a position on officers and other staff, so there's a difficulty there, but I think if we agree the principle, then we can go and talk to Darryl, the monitoring officer, Matthew, and myself and Jenny, and we go back and come back with a training programme, working with the LGA on the assessment document we're sending in, and now we've got the improvement plan. I'm working with Sarah to work out for our next meeting a more comprehensive training programme which fits in slots in those meetings, but we just need to know whether we all agreed. In principle, we hold monthly meetings with a workshop probably before each meeting as part of training and also updating us on the knowledge. Is that something in principle you all agree with? You're saying yes, Mike, you're saying yes. David, I think we both agree with that.
Well, the only thing that I might suggest is that if it's possible to have, sort of tea time briefing session before an event, so that it includes people like Graham who can't get here, that would be helpful.
So, I see you've got your hand up, Tony. What's your thoughts on it?
Sorry, Chair, did you ask me?
You've got your hand up, I thought.
Yes, it was just that also actually if training could be recorded, I think that would also make it easier for those of us that are working to catch up on the training, please.
Yeah, good point. But are you agreeable in principle then to monthly meetings with a workshop like we had today in advance? If we can fix those at a later time of the day for members, do you agree in principle we should aim to get a monthly programme of scrutiny meetings?
Yeah, yes, if that's what's required to do the job, then yes.
Okay, thank you. Maybe what we say is to the end of this business year, in order to catch up on improvement plan items and mainstream agenda, then we can review it when we come to look at the following year's programme. What about you, Jim? Do you agree that we stick to what we agreed at the end of the year?
Well, I'm no fan of a meeting for a meeting. If we've got some good stuff to do, fantastic. If we haven't, cancel the meeting. Let's not have a meeting and sit around and discuss stuff that isn't important. What I would say as well, picking up what Tony said, I was about to say it myself, is let's record these meetings, and it must be painful. Anyone listening, the big white world out there, listens to these meetings. It must be painful for them. But if we're sent them, at least we can play as we're driving somewhere. We can listen to the meetings if we miss them, because I think you also need to remove the stigma of not coming to. If you can't make a meeting, you can't make a meeting. People feel pressurized to be at a meeting. Let's remove that stigma. Let's say, okay, we're increasing the meetings, but we don't actually expect you to make every single meeting. We will send you recordings. You can listen to them. You can catch up. Because I work, I do this in between other stuff as many others do. If that stigma is removed and the recordings are sent to us so we can listen to them when we're driving somewhere, I think that'd be a good way of doing things as well.
Thank you. I don't think there's any stigma, to be honest. I've never felt there's any stigma, and I fully recognise that people can't attend every meeting, and particularly the workshops. We know full well that might be difficult for everybody, and if we record them then and store them, they become part of the long-term training programme. What I want to suggest is this: we asked Sarah to come up with some dates, alternative dates for February and May, to add to the ones, February and April, to add to the two we've already got, to take us to the end of May. We then, before the next meeting, get together with the monitoring officer, with Darryl, Matthew, Jenny and myself, and we come up with a structured work programme that will fit all those dates. And if we don't need them, we don't have them. And then we review it in more detail at the next meeting. Would that make sense to everybody? Yeah. Good, thank you. In the meantime, we need to agree what we're going to do in December.
Can I just mention something in case anybody wants it? I have task and finish groups going in children's and adults going back to 2016. If anybody wants copies of those task and finish groups, I can send them out.
Just
Copies
send
of
to
them all.
members.
Yes, do that please to members.
Yeah.
It'd be really useful. Now, if we look what we had on the original agenda for December, we had public health, dental health and childhood obesity. That was something we agreed some time ago needed to be reviewed. We had holiday activities for schools. I think that probably isn't something at this stage that we would regard as a priority for that meeting. Though it might be because Christmas is coming up. And health and well-being, mental health. We've just agreed mental health will refer back to a March meeting. Does anybody feel that the existing ones are ones we should look at, or you've got an alternative suggestion? Darryl, you put your hand up.
Thanks, Chair. Just to say that when we discussed this at the last meeting, you agreed then that the public health, dental health, childhood obesity would just be a briefing note. So obviously
Yes.
we haven't lined up a speaker or a substantive paper for that one. I think the health and wellbeing item is actually the Director of Public Health's annual report. Yeah.
Will that be available for?
We had that conversation earlier on today to check that. But again, you might, if you want to take that theme of health and well-being of children and young people, you might want to include that in the March agenda, or take it as a separate item.
So we could do that in December separately, or include it as an integrated approach in March.
So in essence, there's nothing. If those things are being carried out, I don't have a pressing agenda item for the December meeting. Of course, excuse me. Of course, we could do some more work. I've got a frog in my throat. Excuse me. We could do more work for you in relation to aspects of the improvement plan, but I'm just mindful we've got about a week to turn around the papers.
And that's part of the problem, members of the committee. We've only got a week to turn around whatever we put on the December meeting. So there's a limit to what we can ask officers to do and what they're able to do in that time period. One issue that came up, and I sent the email around, was we've been asked to consider, and it hasn't been brought in, whether we would want to scrutinise the Children's Services budget. And that's been suggested in the same way that was suggested it could be done as a paper, that we as committee members could ask the questions we want to see in the budget, get a report back, and do it that way rather than have a meeting. And it's suggesting to me there isn't a really great urgency to have a December meeting that would cover anything that we can prepare adequately for between now and then. would that be something, it seems to be a conclusion we're drawing. Would you all agree with that?
There's quite a lot on the to be scheduled or prioritised. I mean, it's just what Darrell was saying about how quickly you can bring these things forward. But you know,
Many of those are annual reports, which you wouldn't typically see produced until the year ends 31st of March, and then we'd be seeing those coming to scrutiny sort of June, July and August typically.
But a lot actually of them may not come to scrutiny, because one of the conversations Matthew, myself and Claire had was to say that as a review of the work programme, looking at Main Street and improvement plan, there are quite a lot of things, as Jim has mentioned, that actually don't need to come to scrutiny. They can be handled a different way. And now we've got the information to part of the work looking at the work programme will be to say those items that we won't bring to scrutiny, which might mean that we can get back to bi-monthly meetings where we're doing constructive improvement plan scrutiny, but not having meetings every month.
And Councillor Summers' point about task and finish activities, that's also another tool in your box going forward. If there's a big ticket item that members feel particularly energised and passionate about, then there's always the option to do a task and finish activity next year.
Yeah. So are we concluding that we don't have a December meeting? Is there a problem we didn't have one? Sarah, is it published? Just the problem, is it?
No, it's not a problem to cancel the date if there's nothing you want to
ones
scrutinise. I
we
mean, you've got that request, say, to have an early look at the budget proposals. That would be in addition to your session that's scheduled in January, which will go through the detailed proposals.
It would also give us time, if we didn't have a December meeting, to get that assessment in place, get it probably scrutinised with Gladys and Claire, pass it to members to look at as well. It would mean getting on with that important work and not having to somehow construe a meeting in December, which actually is very short time to prepare for. Councillor Sockers, you were going to make a point.
Yeah, because you mentioned dental and obesity before, I thought I'd throw it in. There was one done, dental health and childhood obesity was a review concerning dental health and childhood obesity was done in September 2018.
Yes.
It's quite extensive. So again, I have a copy of that if someone wants it.
Okay, thank you. Right, I'll make a proposal then that we don't cover the December.
You've got two hands.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see your hands up. Thanks for pointing out. Tony first.
Yeah, Chair, just wondering if that December meeting is cancelled, but perhaps we could, as a group, look at that effective scrutiny, the LGA sort of work on effective scrutiny, so that the next time we do meet, we're even more effective.
Yeah, good idea. And we have that as a online workshop potentially. Do you agree that'd be a good idea? Tony?
She can't hear you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you've got your hand up, Jim. Can't hear you, Jim, you're on mute still.
Yep, thank you, Chairman. My picture was jumping along the screen as I was trying to unmute. It was just to say, I need to leave now, Chair. I've got some weapons I need to hand in, broadswords, crossbows, a pistol. I phoned the police, they're expecting me. If you're in Hereford, it's going to look like someone at a hot fuzz when I walk in the police station. But I've got to be there before it closes, so I've got to leave now, Chair. But thank you. I thought the meeting went fantastically well today, and it's been a really positive meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you agree with us not having a December meeting then, finally?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Time off in December suits me.
Great, thank you. Great. Thanks a lot. See you soon. Thanks for attending. Bye. Jenny.
I thought that what Tony was suggesting is that we have some sort of a workshop meeting to go through the self-assessment. Yeah. But the other part of it is that we could also have the sneaker peek at the budget at that point, and it can be a sort of a data tuition session, which I've asked for regularly because clearly I'm the most stupid person, but it would be helpful to me. So we could do both those things at a sort of evening briefing session.
Yes, but not in a formal scrutiny.
No.
And I think your suggestion is great, Tony, yes, to have a review together of that assessment programme and, as Jenny says, looking at the budget items as well, as a late afternoon, early evening workshop programme.
You can absolutely do that. I think that just bear in mind, obviously, if you're going to look at the budget in a private session, you can give informal feedback, you
Yeah.
won't be making formal recommendations,
No.
so.
But we might want to
you just
bring
need
those
bear
back
in
to
mind.
an
But you
exercise.
will get a chance, as I say, to scrutinise the detailed proposals in January, but
Yeah.
this is an opportunity to, have some input early on.
So I think we agree, we don't have a December formal meeting. Shall we ask Sarah if you could come back with some suggested dates for a workshop on, well, we will obviously be driving the assessments that we produced.
Yeah,
And the
we can
budget.
try and use that date.
Would we need somebody to come from finance to work us through probably on the budget?
On the budget stuff.
Would that be
yeah,
somebody from your department, Darryl, or would it be somebody from
Uh,
financial services?
that'd be somebody from the finance team.
Okay. And would an early evening, what are we talking about, maybe 6 o'clock in the evening, would that work? 5 o'clock?
Yeah, we can have a.
Does that work for officers as
work
well?
out.
If you wouldn't need to be in attendance probably actually, unless other than us are going to brief us. Okay,
We'll see
so
if we
we'll
can
do that,
organise.
what date, should we say Tuesday evening, would that work better for people?
Do you want to use that date if it's in people's
Yes,
diaries?
use that date.
Use the December 7th date maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it everybody? We will get back to confirming that. Okay, I think that concludes the discussion on the work programme, unless anybody's got any other points to add? Super, thank you.
I've just,
Jenny?
I've got a COVID booster at 4:30 on that date, just to let you know.
I think that'll bring the meeting to a close anyway. Thank you all for attending.
Thank
And
you.
finally, before I formally close this meeting, can I check that with Democratic Services team that live stream has been switched off and we are no longer broadcasting live